So, thank you for sitting down with me. I wanted just to sit down and sort of give a young person's perspective and a young person's point of view and ask some young people questions. So, the first thing I wanted to touch on was not many young people know what they're actually voting for. So it's quite a common misconception that they're voting for the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually voting for a local candidate, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, did you have
So,
something?
yeah, I mean, firstly, thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to speak. It's really important that as a representative, I hit the right notes, as we say, and that means connecting with as many people as possible. So congratulations to you for stepping up and putting me through my paces, first of all, Liam.
Sure, thank you.
What I would say to that is, yeah, I think there are some young people that believe that you're voting for Scott Morrison or Bill Shorten. But obviously the system of government we have, you vote for a person to represent you either in your own electorate or constituency or the whole of the state through the Senate. And I think it's been not just an Australian phenomenon, but right across the world, this sort of focus on the leaders.
Yes.
Through the United States, if you look what's happening around the world. So that sort of, I think, filtered down a bit. And it's been that way, I would say, for about maybe 30 or so years at state and federal levels. Obviously, as a local representative, we have a party leader, and that's Bill Shorten and Scott Morrison for the Liberal Party. But there are more people who I think go in and say, well, who's going to represent me as a local member? And I think it's a mixture of maybe for young people who only have limited access, maybe through social media. They're not reading, perhaps some aren't reading mainstream news sites, or they're interested in other things. So there is a bit of a lens over, I think, what young people do see. But that said, there's an incredible amount of information out there, and I do pick up from a lot of young people, they get it.
Yeah.
That they do understand the issues, the people, and what's at stake.
Yeah, and I think especially the issues, lots of young people are quite interested in the issues. But one thing I got a lot when I was asking around on Facebook and put something out on Instagram and Snapchat as well was people actually hit me back with lots of questions about like who to vote for, and like I was explaining to a lot of people how that actually worked with that you're not voting for necessarily Bill Shorten or Scott Morrison, but you're voting for your local representative.
Yep. And I think that sometimes that information is not as clear as it should be, and that maybe political parties and people running for office could do more to make that aware. Obviously, you know that I visit a lot of schools and I
100%.
move around quite a lot.
Yeah, you're everywhere.
Not everywhere, but I try to be. I try to be everywhere. The thing I love the most, and this is true, whether I be at Coles at Jindalee or whether I be at Middle Park or on the pre-poll, young people in particular, not just young people, but anyone coming up to me and saying, why is this happening? Or what can we do about this? Or I'm really worried about this. What's your answer? No matter where I am, lining up for coffee, out and about going for a run, people will stop me all the time. That's the great thing, and I think we should have more of that, where people question politicians. That's what, to me, what really elections are. They're job interviews and their accountability measures. So you're putting the questions out. You're putting the tough questions. I'm sitting down at podcasts. I'm lining up at pre-poll and people saying, why should I vote for you? What are you going to do on this issue for me? What are you going to take action on climate change? How are you going to deliver it? What's it going to mean for this local community in Australia and the world? So all of those things I'm really, really excited about. I mean, it's one of the reasons that drives me as a representative and as someone in politics. I wasn't particularly interested in politics when I was at school. I think that would be honest. But since I've understood, I know the power of politics and how governments can hopefully change communities and countries for the better.
Yeah. So another misconception I got a lot when people were asking questions and stuff, I think someone said to me, I'm not in Oxley, I'm in Darra. So
Yeah.
that's another common misconception. I looked it up. The Oxley electorate actually covers Jindalee, Cinnamon Park, all the way out to like Springfield Lakes, Red Bank,
Yep.
all of those. So what's that like, having so many different places that you've got to make sure you represent? And
Yeah, there's around 120 odd thousand people that I represent. So I've got a lot of customers
Yeah.
and a lot of employers,
Yeah,
as
that's right.
I call them. Oxley is named after John Oxley, the explorer. There's 151 electorates in Australia named after regions, famous kind of Australians who contributed, some named after Indigenous leaders, all those sorts of things. Fun fact that the suburb of Oxley is only partly in Oxley. So there's a lot of people who actually live in the suburb of Oxley, not in the Oxley Federal Electorate. Minor confusion. But look, it's a diverse electorate. It's a really diverse. It would be up there in one of the most multicultural electorates in Australia. 60,000 people born overseas. Different issues in different areas. High growth areas, as you mentioned, up through the Springfield Lakes area. Your more established areas in the Centenary kind of hood. And then sort of areas of sort of disadvantage as well, and some people doing a bit tough in others. So it's a real, I guess, I call it always a snapshot of Australia. It's got every bit of Australia here. We've got industry, we've got manufacturing, we've got 100%. Small businesses, we've got, you name it. And I think it's a really good snapshot of what's going on in Australia, with people struggling at the moment, young people a bit concerned about what's going to happen for the future of the planet, how we're going to tackle and take real action on climate change. What does it mean for the future of work, for maybe kids starting at primary school now? What does that look like in 10 or 20 years' time? So we've got a lot of opportunities in this area, but it's a diverse area. Any one day I can be going to Centenary High School, grabbing a pho soup from a great Vietnamese restaurant, nipping out to an event in Springfield Lakes, going across to Redbank Plains or Collingwood Park, and all the issues are different, and all the people have different issues as well. So it's a real melting pot, but it's a wonderful community. It's fantastic to represent.
So you spoke, I'm going to jump to it a bit, about climate change. And something that I got a lot from a lot of people is, what is the government doing and what are you doing?
Yeah, look, I think this election is really more and more focused on the future. All elections are sort of like that, and you normally hear commentators say, this is the most important election in a generation. But for the first-time voters, and there's a growing number in the Oxley electorate, number one issue that I get hit up all the time is taking action on climate change, reducing our emissions, making sure that Australia is doing its bit, making sure that we've got a coherent climate change policy and energy policy, looking at the renewable sector and how we can transition and adjust transition, making sure that we're supporting businesses, making sure that we're supporting people right across the economy with a strategic plan and details on the table. The big opportunities we've lost, in my opinion, over the last 6 years, we've had the current government, this will get a bit political, the current government that has been fighting amongst itself whether climate change is real. So you've got some dinosaurs in the current parliament saying, oh, well, the science, is a bit iffy. Tony Abbott once famously said it was crap. I read a report somewhere yesterday that he's bet $100 that the climate isn't changing. Like, when you got those sort of different opinions, and Malcolm Turnbull, to his credit, was moving forward, but then some of the dinosaurs didn't like what he was doing, so they got rid of him. But they got rid of Tony Abbott because the Malcolm Turnbull people didn't think he was doing enough. So we've sort of had this infighting with that. For me, it's really clear the science is in.
Yes.
Okay, no debate,
100%.
no question.
Yep.
It's not like, oh, I've read something on the internet or I saw something on Facebook. The science is in, right?
Yeah, we've got like 12 years, don't we?
Yeah,
I think that's the
and
number.
you know, you saw the report this week that extinctions are on the rise. You know, these are big issues that Australia's got to confront: natural disasters, floods, fires.
Yeah.
Okay, the environment is changing. We need to make sure that we've got a government that is focused on the future, not questioning the science, not questioning whether it's real, actually taking action. And for me, sitting in the Parliament for the last 3 years, I've been bitterly disappointed that while putting policies on the table when we should be uniting to take action on climate change,
Yes.
we've seen one side of politics ripping themselves apart, taking out leaders, changing governments just because they're not sure on the science. For me, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And young people in Australia, I think, probably are feeling that frustration for a whole other issues, and there's a number of reasons why people are a bit dissatisfied with politics in the world, not just here in Australia.
Yes.
You look at Brexit, you look at what's happening in the US, in Europe, parts of Europe. I get it. People are a bit pissed off about the major parties. I hear that all the time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I guess for me, I practice what I preach. I want to make sure that we do have good action on climate change, that we've got a suite of policies that will benefit Australia on the world stage, but also that individuals can take action as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really something young people are really concerned about because of the fact that, you know, the older sort of people, the people running the country in 20, 30 years, they're going to be finished, maybe 40, but we're going to be the ones coming into it, and it's going to be our kids as well.
Yeah, over the last 3 years since when I was elected in 2016, I guess the low light, if you want to say, on this issue was when we had the current Prime Minister wave around a big lump of coal. Now, that's not a climate change policy. That's a stunt.
Yeah.
We can have a discussion about mining and transition to renewable energy. Look, sure, but that's just silly, in my opinion. I don't think that inspires young people. I don't think that inspires any people at all to do those sorts of sort of stunts. And I think that's one of the reasons the government's so out of touch. I think that's one of the reasons politicians are seen through a bad light, because they're not following the issues, in particular, that young people want us to focus on.
Yeah, so on coal, I also got, there's a young man, he's one of my friends who's a big supporter of Labor, doesn't like the Liberals very much, but he says that he's voting Greens now because of the Adani issue. So he asked, why aren't Labor more against it, and why aren't you personally more against it?
Well, the Labor Party has made our position really, really clear. If the project doesn't stack up environmentally or economically, we won't support it. The Labor Party's led the campaign on sort of ensuring, I think, that public money is not invested here. We want the science to speak for itself. Obviously, we're not in government. The federal government has given its approvals, and that's not that's through environmental agencies and our departments assessing projects, and that's going through the state at the moment. So there's a couple of issues there about environmental concerns that the state have identified. Essentially, if it is approved, we won't be tearing up contracts. That's not how sort of we've given that commitment. I can understand that people do have concerns. It gets back to my earlier remarks that if you have a government focused on climate change and actually delivering support for the renewable energy sector in this country, coal is part of our mix in terms of where our energy comes from and our exports, particularly here from Queensland. So under a future Labor government or any government, there will still be coal mined and exported. I guess the difference what we're taking to the election is we want a plan to move towards renewables. Okay,
Yes.
we want
Yeah.
targets put in place. We want to be able to have governments working with households and industry because there are jobs in the renewable sector. It's better for the environment. If you look at what's happening in places like Japan, Taiwan, sort of in our region, these are the countries that are moving towards successfully transitions into the renewable space, and they're not partisan. They're not sort of these big environmental political wars that we're seeing. So I understand that people do have concerns. I'm hearing it very loudly and clearly. But our position has been, as long if the project doesn't stack up environmentally and economically, we won't support it.
Okay. So that's, I think, the big thing that people want to hear is that it's got to, like you say,
It's got
stack
to
up.
go through all of the environmental processes.
Yeah.
It's got to stand on its own 2 feet, economically. So the government can't come in and sort of, start funding all of those things. Labor's made that very clear in terms of infrastructure around the project. But look, I understand it's an issue, but it's one project. And, for me, as a representative, the bigger picture is a broader picture also about taking action on climate change and
correct.
protecting species, biodiversity, all of those things. And we've got some pretty strong policies out there about that.
Yeah. So move over to the more getting into the politics side of it. This is from my friend Kalela. She said, "What's the best way for young people to educate themselves on politics? Dad's taught me pretty well over the years, but all political campaigns we've seen recently, especially this year, haven't been about what all the parties are about, but rather what the other party has done wrong. It's child's play. So where/how can we find what party we fall under, what the benefits of both parties are, what's promised, etc., as unbiased as possible?" So it's a bit of a two-part question.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's true to say, and obviously I'm a Labor party member and a representative, so I'll probably give you the Labor line, obviously. I think this election campaign, more than any others, it's been from our side or my side, the Labor Party saying, right, this is what our agenda is. We want to invest in the schools of tomorrow. Every school and electorate will benefit by a new funding amount of $21 million over the next 3 years. We want to restore health and funding cuts. Things like affordable childcare when people are going back to work, for people who aren't spending all their money just on the costs of childcare. Things like looking after pensioners who need, major teeth work and ensuring that there's adequate support for that. Or when you get cancer, making sure a new investment in Medicare, all of those things we're talking about, whether it be lifting the caps at university, free TAFE places being more available and investing in TAFE, all of those things which we're sort of putting on the table, some pretty bold changes as well at the other end of the multinationals and sort of tax end to fund those sorts of major infrastructure projects. And the government of the day are basically saying Labor's bad.
Yes.
That's the policy.
And that's what I heard from a friend of mine who was asking me about who to vote for. He said that he's been hearing that Labor's going to be raising taxes and making it that you have to work harder to retire. Which I know is, I watched the Q&A with Bill Shorten, that it's not so much that you're bringing in taxes, it's that you're not giving, as he says, gifts.
We're changing the tax mix at the top end of town, at the more wealthy end. I think that's pretty clear. There's no retiree tax. There's no housing tax. There's no, that's just signs on 3 words on a sign. When you ask a Conservative or what is the tax, they can't answer it because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We are changing the way that dividend franking credits are issued for high, wealthier people. We're changing that so that the $6 to $8 billion that we'll be spending on gifts back to people who haven't paid tax are reined in, so that we can invest in the hospitals and schools that Australia needs, and particularly people who want to study or go to university or to TAFE, to make sure that we've got adequate aged care support and infrastructure built, people who have to get in and out of the city, sitting on traffic on the Ipswich
Yeah.
motorway, announced $500 million with Albo on uh, last Friday for a down payment to fix the bottleneck between Darra and Oxley.
Yeah.
Those things, I understand. They're important for local residents and they're important for the nation. And we've been very upfront about changes to how people get, tax loopholes being reined in,
Yeah.
making sure multinationals are paying more of their fair share of tax, changing the mix about people who get tax concessions for buying their sixth or seventh property,
Yeah.
making sure that we're on the side of people getting into the housing market. I understand that, all the government's really got, in my opinion, is a scare campaign.
Yeah.
They're not saying, from what I've seen, what they want to do for Australia, or what they want to do for schools, TAFE and university in this country, what they want to do to build the infrastructure for the future, or investing in communities or support services. They're not really outlining anything. They're just sort of saying, we're not Labor and Bill Shorten's apparently bad. That's their campaign. And I just think that's not working. It's not cutting it.
Yeah, so the other part of that question was the ads at the moment, and I think I saw one, so I think it's starting, or one positive one from Labor, but so they're hitting, I think, YouTube pretty hard, especially, I'm guessing, the demographic of people who are 18. Before that one that I saw yesterday, it's been all negative from both sides. So the Labor ran the one that Scott Morrison hasn't been doing nothing. He's been doing XYZ. And then they were running a similar one about Labor. And that was another thing I saw with during the state campaign, was that there was double the negative bunting than positive. And so I think that's part of the reason that young people are finding it hard to get into politics, to understand positions, because you have one side say they're going to do something, another side saying that that's not true, and it's just this back and forth always, and then it's hard to connect what those politicians actually get done. So in the election campaign, a lot of statements will be made about what each side is going to do, but how much of that actually gets done in the 3 or 4 year term that they have.
Well, obviously, if Labor is not elected on May 18, all of those things that I've been talking about
Won't happen.
Well, the government has a habit of picking up a lot of our ideas, so they normally pick out some, and then after we've done the hard work, they'll introduce them. So I don't know. You'd have to ask the government if they were successful. I get it that people see the politicians yelling at each other in the parliament, but I want to be really clear on that. That's a very small part of what politics in Australia is. That's the bit on the news, I get it, and that's the bit sometimes seen on Facebook and the clips. They sort of see one side coming up with an idea and the other side saying it's a bad idea, and vice versa. I understand that's the perception. There is a lot of common ground amongst, all parties in terms of when good ideas do come forward, but obviously it's a battle of ideas. It's a contest of ideas.
Yes.
Our ideas, I think, are vastly different from the conservative movement and the sort of right-wing agenda in Australia. We believe in a progressive Australia where, the middle is looked after, not just the top end of town. And we're having these ads because we've got to let people know what's at stake here, and there is a choice. You talked about, the cost of policies or Bill Shorten's tax or whatever. There's a really simple question that government's not answering that, we're asking over and over again through ads, through social media. What is it going to cost to give the wealthiest the biggest tax cut?
Yes.
At the end, is it? We've got evidence to suggest that it's $77 billion. That the right at the top end of town, the really wealthy people, that's going to cost. Now, the government won't answer that. So if you're not answering it and there's no figure on it, we're going to keep telling people that's what's at stake at this election. Obviously, the Prime Minister and Josh Frydenberg aren't coming to the Jindalee pre-poll and saying, hello, vote for us. We're going to give wealthy people, ultra wealthy and big business a tax cut. Hello, would you vote for us? Why? because no one's going to agree with that. No one stopped me at Coles at Middle Park and said, "Oh, Milton, I really think people over $200,000 should pay less
Yeah.
tax, and
Yeah.
multinationals shouldn't have to pay tax." Milton, not one single person in 3 years has ever said that to me,
Yeah.
right? So that's where the advertising bit comes in, where we start saying, "Hey, listen, this is," and they'll do the same thing. I get it that people are a bit cynical. To go back to your earlier question about where do you get the unfiltered
Yes.
news, look, I'd go to the party websites. I'd go to the ALP website where policies are listed, read the policies, see what people think about it. Obviously, journalists and commentators will put their slant on it, and
Yeah,
obviously
that's
politicians
the-
will. But there are some pretty good detailed policies out there on both sides, to be fair, and I'd encourage people to go and have a read of them.
Yeah.
Read them for themselves, sit down. If you want to know what the policies are, they're listed on websites, what it means for people.
And I think I've seen, me and my brother both did it, the ABC Compass
Yep.
is quite good, 'cause you have 30 questions and then at the end you can see, I don't know how they get their positions, but it shows what position each party has on each question.
Yeah, and some conservatives will say, "Oh, you know, the ABC is full of communists and all
Yes,
that
I've heard
rubbish
that.
they're going about." But compasses are really good, I guess, if you're interested in politics and you want to know, sort of through a arbiter, what the deal is. That's a really good place
Yeah.
as well.
So back to the, you said that Scott Morrison, the government, won't answer what's the cost of the big thing. But is that a fair criticism if Bill Shorten's doing the same on, I forget exactly what they were asking him, but how much it would cost for
we're
certain
releasing
issues.
all our costings tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, which is the first time in a long time that a week out from an election, not a day or two, as happened last time. I think
Oh, okay. Yeah.
2016 it was 3 days out. 2010 it was a day out. The coalition released this. So, like, I think people need to know what's at stake at this election and what the choices are in terms of future versus more of the same. And we're going to be pushing as hard as we can, and I certainly am, that we do need change in the country, that Australia can be better. And that's sort of, I guess, putting costings out on the table, answering those questions, and then obviously we'll be saying to the government, match it, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, so jumping across a bit, another issue that has been really dominant among young people is mental health. So I have 2 questions here. What's your thoughts on mental health and how it's impacting today's youth? And do you agree with Bill Shorten that it should be declared a state of emergency? That was a question that he was asked whether it should, and he tended to agree upon him.
Did he say it was a state of emergency? That's sort of like a maybe you mean like a national priority? Was that sort of
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, state of emergency is normally when there's natural disasters and those things, but maybe I'll check it out. But I think he was talking about being a national priority, and it's probably a national emergency across.
Yeah.
Can you start by claiming that this is a national emergency? Because no one has done that. No one has put this on that level and committed all government resources necessary to do something about it.
Yeah, I think that's fair language. I think it's a national disaster, national emergency.
Across the country and parts of the world. Yeah, look, nothing makes me sadder. I probably can't find the right words. Is when I sit down with sometimes family members, mums and dads, who have lost a family member due to youth suicide.
Yeah.
You know, we need to have a more honest and open conversation about mental health. When I was a sort of younger bloke, it wasn't really spoken about a lot, and I'm not that old. I think I'm not that old. It wasn't really sort of spoken about, like even at school when I was finishing school. It wasn't really spoken about. There weren't the support services, you know, things like Headspace. It wasn't discussed in sort of even family situations sometimes, or social media, media, I should say, because there was no social media back then.
Yeah.
So I think having the conversations through schools and networks and support services is critical, but government's also got to play a role.
Yeah.
We've got to step up. We've got to step in with early intervention, support services, drug alcohol services, substance abuse, all of those things. We've got to cross agencies, across government. Bill's made it a national priority for him and will be for the Labor government. We've got a whole range of policies that we have put out there to support services, to increase support services for people who are doing it tough. The rise of social media, online bullying, it's a multifaceted thing. It's not just one simple answer to that, but it's a huge issue. It's a national tragedy, and I think government's got to do more and got to spend more money to support people, and particularly through schools, I think.
I think that's a big part. Uni, and because it's the biggest killer of 15 to 44-year-olds. So, and I was looking at it yesterday, but I also did my speech on it in high school, that for every 8 suicides a day, there's 30 people who attempt. So, I think it's a big issue, and I think it's one that young people are really concerned about because, we're going into that stage, and it's not great to hear that people still are having problems in their life, and people say things get better, but when you look at 15 to 44, people obviously not having.
We've got to have a more honest and open conversation.
And I think that's a big part of it.
That starts with everyone sort of taking responsibility and looking after each other and making sure governments across state and federal levels are there to support people who are doing it tough.
Yeah.
That the service is there. One of the things I was really proud of about 6 or 7 years ago, I was the consortium initial chair for setting up Headspace in Inala.
Yeah.
So bringing everyone together, I did that for a couple of years, and it was, those services are good now, outreach into the PCYC, but we need more services.
Yes.
And Headspace is only one component of it, but that's a place where young people without referral come in, talk to someone, psychologists are there, to help people deal with some of the pressures, because that's what a lot of young people are, they're under pressure.
Yeah.
Through peer pressure, through worrying about their future, worrying about where they're going to go, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's a whole other issue there of youth homelessness, kids at risk, all of those things.
Yeah,
it's a big body of work, and we're really committed to hopefully being in government to do more to support those kids doing it tough.
Yeah. A little question from another mate of mine. When will there be a bus from Wakehold to Mount Hominy?
When will there be a bus from Wakehold to Mount Hominy? Well, that's a TransLink and sort of state and council issue. I don't have that off the top of my head, but if you give me that person's details, or I can follow that up for you about TransLink and
all right,
and seeing if they want to get a link to. Currently now, you'd probably catch the train to Darra.
Yeah.
And then maybe a bus, or
I think
I'm just trying to work
something
out
about that.
Yeah. Anyway, let's look at how those services how they can be improved.
Yeah. So another one on education. She didn't word it great. It says, when will uni be free? I don't think that's the best way to word it, but that's another problem young people are facing, is that they're going into a lot of debt, not straight away. They have the payoff scheme, but what is Labor doing nationally to reduce those costs?
Well, we're opposing what the government tried to do in this term, or the last term, $100,000 degrees, number one, lifting the cap so more people can get into university. Also ensuring that kids from low income and non-speaking backgrounds have more support of transitioning into uni. Having transition courses in place so that perhaps kids who didn't finish school or struggled at school can have a pathway into higher ed. Obviously, not every young person is going to go to university, not every young person wants to go to university, but having the pathways of where people do want to go, vocational education and training, investing in our TAFEs places, having apprenticeships. We're on the cusp in this region of the new Defence Force contract Rheinmetall being built here. That's been approved. New vehicles at Redbank. I want to make sure that the jobs of the future are linked in, and university is a key component of that. But making sure that university is more affordable. It won't be free under Labor. I don't think any government is going to bring back free university. But knowing that if you want to go to university, you can, and that cost is not a barrier to you will be a priority under a future Labor government.
Yeah. So that's quite a lot of them. I've got a last one. This one's pretty controversial. And I think it's... I've seen it a bit in the news, but I haven't seen it in the campaign, about legalising marijuana for recreational use. I think the Greens were pretty supportive about it, and I think I saw that there was a bill that was pushed back for ACT, it being legalised there, but that's been pushed back. And I first saw it on 9 that they were talking about like possible $1 billion in revenue and roughly 250,000 jobs. And obviously there's a whole bunch of costs that won't happen because of that, so like imprisonment and that sort of thing. What's your position and what's Labor's position?
Well, we're not going to be legalising marijuana. That would be through state laws as well. We're focusing on access to medicinal cannabis as well. I think obviously the science is pretty strong on that, and state and territory laws have been doing some good work in that, which is a different issue, I know. But yeah, look, drug law reform is an issue that comes up from time to time. There's no policies to make recreational marijuana more available or legal. So yeah, at this stage, that's a no. But obviously, happy to hear from people's feedback and feed that into the state laws as well. I know some countries in the US have done some trials, and there's some places, but currently there's no plans to change the laws here in Australia.
So that's more of a state issue, like it is in America, where they have to do it state by state?
They might. I'd have to check that. I'm pretty sure that it's mostly state laws, but across Australia, there'd be no universal plan to legalise it, and certainly Labor is not looking at decriminalising marijuana in any way, shape or form.
All right. I've got a last one. It's probably...
Is this really the last one?
Yes.
The last one.
What are you doing to reduce crime within the community? Which I don't think is a high. It's pretty low, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, obviously, no crime is the goal.
Yeah.
And obviously through our state enforcement agencies, through the Queensland Police Service, which deals with sort of law and order primarily at the frontline issues. We've seen record investments in police and corrective services, particularly in sort of this part of Queensland, with the Police Academy on our doorstep here. Yeah. We've got some fantastic QPS officers, the new police beat, the police beat which is reinstated on 17 Miles Rocks Road. Working closely from a federal level, I work closely with all of our neighbourhood watch groups who do a fantastic job about not just dobbing on neighbours, but educating, awareness. Community safety and community policing is a really important part. We want to make sure that everyone is safe in their homes, particularly seniors as they move around as well. Yeah. I'm unaware of any great spikes of break and enters in our community. So it's more of a state issue, but we want to make sure things like drug importation, illegal firearms, all of those things,
Yeah.
we have adequate support services for the Australian Federal Police, which has seen some reduction in some of its funding over the years under the current government, but also making sure that we don't water down our firearm laws. We saw, I think, some of the One Nation candidates and leaders, former Senate candidates, travel to America, meet with the NRA, apparently not to raise money or to talk about watering down firearm laws, but, you know, getting pissed and, you know, boasting about our laws. That's one thing John Howard did really well. You know, I disagree with him on a lot of policies, but we have some of the toughest laws in Australia, and certainly while I'm ever elected, I will never, ever want to see those laws ever either reduced or watered down.
Definitely shouldn't touch.
Yeah, and
don't break something that works well, right?
No matter whatever happens, that's a red line for me. I would never vote, support, and anyone who does, I think we should, as a community and a society, call them out on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for sitting down with me and taking some of the questions that have come from the younger people.
I really appreciate the opportunity, and as I said, we've got 9 days to go until the election. Jump on my Facebook page, jump on my Instagram page, Milton Dick MP, or Twitter feed at Milton Dick MP, and happy in between pre-poll, door knocking, train stations to get back to as many people as possible.
Yeah, too easy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liam.